One day your life will flash before your eyes. Make sure it's worth watching.
Let's go. This video is not going to be selling you LUTs. I want to talk about the projects that I just showed in the intro and how you can make your own filmic looks for your videos. It doesn't matter what camera you have. The only requirement is you can't be on Premiere Pro. So let's get started. Now, before we jump into DaVinci, we need to understand what makes an image look like film. And there's 4 things that we're going to focus on. First is highlight and shadow roll-off. Second is halation, or the glow of your image. Third is the film grain. And finally, number 4 is going to be the film emulation that you can choose. Let's get started. So we're going to hop right into the color tab of our first project. Let's go. And you can see all of the nodes here. This is what we call our node tree. And you can see if we go across the videos here, it's pretty much the same between all of them. And the point is to keep this entire structure familiar throughout the whole project. So let's go into this shot. It's a cool looking hero shot and it looks good. And the first tip I'm going to give you with your color grading is going to be always start editing on your hero shot, because if you start editing on a frame that's basically useless, or it doesn't represent the image in its entirety, the color grade isn't going to look great. So make sure that you're on your hero shot, and yeah, let's keep going. First, we have our grain, which is one of the steps that we talked about to achieving a film look. And in DaVinci, you have that right up here in your effects. Now, we're going to be using the 35mm 400T. I kept the opacity at 0.5 there, but if you don't want a lot of grain, you can turn that down. If you want more, you can turn it up, and you can see if we zoom in, you can see it affecting the image. When I started color grading, I always thought that there's one way to do it. Like, I watched so many videos on how to achieve a film look, just like the one you're watching right now. And the truth is, there is no one right way, which is why I'm making this video. You can do it however you want to. If you want to have lots of grain, that's great. If you don't want to have any grain, that's also cool. For the purposes of this video, most film looks include grain, so we're going to keep it on. Next up, we have our camera raw adjustments. Now, this project was filmed on a Blackmagic camera, so if we go into our camera raw data down here, we can see all of the settings, the ISO, the color temperature, tint, and then something that we adjust quite a lot is the midpoint, which is basically, if we adjust it here, just bringing up or down your image. If you don't have a raw option in your camera, if you're shooting on Sony or Canon, something like that doesn't have raw, then you can just use these color wheels in here, the offset. It'll do something pretty similar. Okay, next up we have our CST. This stands for color space transform. And if we go into our effects here, you can see we input our color space, which again, you can use for any camera. So if you're using a Sony, you can do Sony S-Gamut 3 Cine, and then you can go down here into Sony S-Log 3. And then this is very important, okay? So you want to output your color space to DaVinci Wide Gamut. And DaVinci Wide Gamut allows you the most amount of flexibility for your image, not breaking the highlights or crushing the blacks too much. It allows you to have the most information. So output color space, DaVinci Wide Gamut, output gamma, DaVinci Intermediate, okay? These two things, they go together, we are in a different color space because we just changed to DaVinci Intermediate. We're not in Rec 709. So that means that we can make all of our adjustments in here in this beautiful color space, okay? The first adjustment we made is curves. Second one is some masking. Turn that on and off. That's just for the headlight, the street light up here. We have some more masking, a little bit of halation, a little bit of orangey colors, and then you can see these two nodes are disabled because I don't actually use them. The skin tone, if you have a shot where there's a lot of skin tones present, like maybe something like this, you might want to adjust the skin tones. And this is why you have a node tree, because sometimes you don't need to use the skin tones. CST, this is a color space transform again. And if we go into effects, you can see that we're taking it out of DaVinci Wide Gamut and DaVinci Intermediate and into Rec 709, which you should be familiar with, and Cineon Film Log. Now that's kind of the secret thing here. I don't want to call it a secret because that sounds stupid, but it's the thing that helps get us to that film look. Remember, another thing we talked about is film emulation, and the Cineon Film Log, if we move here, now we can put it into a reveal selected LUT. We can put it into a Fujifilm conversion. You can see it pops up there, Rec 709 Fujifilm D55. Okay, so this one is the one that worked for my project. I really liked it. Maybe your shots are completely different from mine. They're not in the nighttime. You could use some other ones. There's D60, D65, and these are all different types of film emulation. So this is really just up to you. However you want your project to look, you can pick one of these film looks. And the nice thing is it's completely built into DaVinci, so you don't have to worry about downloading LUTs, which is awesome. And the last node is going to be our halation node. This is pretty standard across all film looks. If we zoom in here and hit Command D, you can see it's just highlighting the very tops of his hair and adding some red glow up here on the fringes of his shirt here. Look at that. That's another little secret. It's not a secret, again, I keep saying that, but this is what takes your image from a digital look to a film look. All of these little things. This is all the stuff that goes into making your image look like film. Okay, so we're gonna turn all of this off here. So that is the image that we started with. So this is an image, our final image, okay? And it looks really good. It has some blue tones, it has some yellowy tones, the orange and teal. It's cinematic, everyone loves it, and it looks really good for this shot. We have our leading lines going down here, and yeah, I was really happy with the shot. So you can see, this is our entire node tree here, and we talked about that already. Now I wanna focus in on two things. Let's go to this clip and watch how it changes up here, okay? Okay, do you see that? And this is just showing you our color space transform and then color space transform again to Cineon Film Log. Let's open that up. So you have your input, which is your camera, output DaVinci, input DaVinci, output Cineon Film Log, and then you have your output as your final film look, which is, if we click reveal selected LUT, this one is our D55 again. Now the reason we put it in this order, the reason why we have our color space transform first is because we need to be taking our look from our camera, right? If you're filming Sony, that's S-Log3. You need to take that image and then you need to change it into your DaVinci Wide Gamut, right? And the DaVinci Wide Gamut, like we mentioned, is going to be the most information possible for you to play around with, which is how we get a very dynamic and beautiful image, or at least that's how I've done it. And the other thing is going to be transforming that into your Cineon Film Log. Now, Cineon Film Log just allows you to put the film look on top of it. So it doesn't really mean anything. Like if we turned our film look off here, it looks like log footage again, right? But when we turn that on, our film look, then it starts to look good. Okay, next we're going to go over our curves, our halation, and our grain. This is what we want to get to. This is what I just showed you here, kind of a boring flat image. We've converted it. And then the next step is to add our camera raw adjustments. So these are just our basic adjustments. And then we're going to add our curves up here. You can see just a little bit of difference there. Let me turn off this, make it bigger for you. And then we're going to hit Command D to show you the difference on there, the curves. And then we're also going to show you the grain. And that is the 35mm 400T at 0.5 opacity. And we have our halation. I'll show you the effects here. So we have threshold at 0.275. Okay, so let's see if we turn this off here. Zoom in. Look at that. Pretty big difference, to be honest. And this is mild compared to what some people do. If you want to take a look at, I think her name is Natalie Flynn. She puts on, no, it's Vuhlandes, Vuhlandes. He's a YouTuber. He puts on so much halation and it looks really good. Again, this is really a creative decision and it's totally up to you. But if we zoom out, you can see the effects right there. Okay. So first of all, we put our grain in the beginning because it makes sense to me. That's what I've always done. You could put it at the end. I don't think it would make too much of a difference. Next up, our camera raw adjustments. This one, we actually didn't even have to do anything. So to adjust your camera raw, you can go into clip and then you could adjust the midpoint if you want to make it brighter. But I like the dark look on this one. The curves is where it gets interesting. Okay, so you see how I don't go all the way up where it's supposed to be? I leave it down here. That's on purpose. And same thing with the shadows down here, the darks. Okay, now the reason we do this is because we don't want to crush our blacks too much. We don't want that. That's not how real film is exposed. And same with our highlights. They should never be blown out. Okay, so this is just to protect. And this is, you know, you could change it. You could go up here, you could change it like that. But you can see the majority of our image on the waveform is down here. So adjusting stuff all the way up here isn't doing too much on this particular image. But you will have some shots where it could affect that. Okay, and the last thing that you're going to need to get to that final stage is going to be the masking. And this is important to an extent, because you can really shape your image. But I also understand if you don't want to do this because it does take a bit of skill and time to get right. And if you have a moving shot, you'll have to track the mask. So it can be time consuming, but it's definitely worth it. If we take a look at the difference in here, take a look at that. So this is our image right now. And then if we go here, that's our final image. Okay. Look how good that looks. So let's talk about what we are doing in our masks with this image, okay? Here's our masks starting, okay? And the very first thing we do is I brought up the curves here. So just up a little bit and hit Shift A to see where your mask is affecting. So we know that it's affecting just this middle area here. Brought it up a little bit because we really want to highlight down this corridor and we want to leave everything else on the sides here, kind of to forget. And I brought down here a little bit because we don't want our image to be washed out. We still want the darks to be nicely contrasted. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at an outside mask. Okay, so you can go add node, add outside, and that'll add an outside node here. And basically this just, if we hit Shift A, it reverses our image. So on this one, we're affecting everything in here. On this one, we're affecting everything outside of the middle. So if we take a look at what we did here, all I did was just bring it down a tiny bit, but it makes a big difference. Look at that. And again, all of these are stylistic choices. So if you don't like how this particular outside node looks, then by all means, don't add an outside node on your footage. Next up is another pair of nodes. Okay, so watch this bottom right-hand corner waveform here. Okay, so when I disable this mask, you can see this is how the image was originally looking. Okay, so we have our reds here, our blues down here. Now if we turn it on, you can see it brings our reds way down. Okay, so this is essentially making our image. And if we watch the image now, this is with it on, off. So this is how the image looked before. That's how the image looks now. Okay, so it's basically just taking out some of our warmth here. And how we can do this, we can adjust the offset. You can see these are pretty major changes that we're making. So you want to keep it really, really gradual, like very small changes. And if you want to affect just the shadows out here, then you could change the lift. Again, I'm not really paying attention, so this isn't looking bad. But yeah, you want to make very subtle adjustments and really just pull it a tiny bit. You can adjust it through these little wheels as well. So next up is our gradient masks. We used one on the floor because this is distracting to me. I want them to be focusing on the character here. We can use a gradient mask, which is just in here, right here, and pull it up from the bottom. If we see what we're affecting, it's just down here. On, off, on, off. And our next gradient mask is very similar. We're basically pulling down just the very side here, just making it a bit less distracting. And we can do this by adjusting our curves, or you could pull down the entire offset. And those are just about all of the steps to get your film look. Let's take a look at one different project that we showed in the intro. Each image is different coloring. It has different values of red, blue, and green. And so some film looks will look better on other shots, and some film looks will look better, you know, in the daytime, for example. This was all a night shoot, so it's very different from, you know, broad daylight shooting. All right, let's play this project really quickly. Sorry if it's glitchy. I'm playing it off of a hard drive. So pro tip, don't use hard drives, but I don't have enough space. Well, look at those shots. So nice. Really, really nice. This beginning shot is just unreal. This was shot again on the Blackmagic 6K Pro in 6K raw footage, so you have so much flexibility, and I've really loved working with that camera. All right, so if we go into our node tree, you can see it's very similar. It looks intimidating at first, but remember, we just broke it down. It's really not that bad. So we have our grain, we have our camera raw adjustments, or your primary adjustments as some people call it. We have our first CST, color space transform, which gets us into DaVinci wide gamut. Then we do all of our adjustments in here, do all of our masking, and then we finally get back to our CST. We transform that back into Rec 709 and Cineon film log, and then we apply our film look. And if we reveal our selected LUT, this one is also D55. I believe that's what we used on the last project as well. I guess it's just a good film emulation. Lastly, we have our halation, which again, zoom all the way in here. This one I made really grainy. So that's off, on, off, on. And it just gives it texture. Halation, off, on, off, on. And look at that. That's that smooth highlight roll off. That's what we're talking about. Okay. And then let's shift Z to get this back into frame. Let's go to our curves. We did the same exact thing here. We don't crush the blacks. We don't overexpose the highlights. On this one, we used a little bit of a gradient coming down from the bottom again. This is totally up to you. I like the way it looked. It kind of was distracting the ground up here, so just making it a little bit darker. I like that. I like the contrast that it gives. And then here's another mask that we did, vignetting the edges, because again, we want to really bring our focus into the character. If you followed along on this video and you're still not getting that cinematic image that you were hoping for, then there could be a couple reasons. Number one is your camera simply doesn't capture enough data. If you are using a cheap camera, sometimes if you're trying to make these adjustments, it just doesn't look quite as good as filming in RAW. The location, the time of day, and even your costume design, right? Like if we look at this project where the person is wearing a hat, they have buckles on them, they look like a cowboy, it all adds to the image. It all makes it look authentic and look like a real film, look like time went into it. So it's not just about how you craft your image, it's also about all of the things on set, right? What time of day did you film at? Was it sunset? Was it sunrise? Or was it just middle of the day, afternoon, with the sun straight over top of you? If you film your friend in a kitchen with sweatpants and an overhead fluorescent light, it's probably not going to be very film looking, even if you did all these steps. And the last thing I would say is you need to practice using different LUTs and different film emulations, because like I said, all images are different. All of them have different values of red, green, and blue. And so some of the LUTs and some of the film emulations interact with those colors differently. So I use D55 Kodak film, but you might be using something completely different because it looks better for your image. All right, peace.